I want to draw your attention to a feature of material that's applied to the door. I'm first going to select my directional light and I'm going to rotate it until the sun has set in our scene. This way we'll have a fully dark environment, and you could see immediately that that center jewel on our door is glowing and producing light that's contributing to our Cornell box. And of course the lighting is blue hued as well. So let's take a look at what's going on with this material. I'm actually going to leave our directional light in this position for a second. I'm going to select the door in the hierarchy and come into one of the child objects so I can get to our door material. And if I scroll down here, you could see that there is a section called emission, which is ticked on, and it has a map and a color, and finally an intensity value. Now all three of these contribute to the glow effect that we're seeing in our scene. I'm actually going to find this material in our project so we don't have to deal with the selection in our scene. So I'm just going to search for it really quickly. There it is. There we go. So now we could look at the material and see it glowing in our scene. So the emission channel is essentially a glow channel. The map here is simply a black and white texture, as we could see here, with that jewel showing up as kind of a very light gray and the rest of the texture showing up as black. This is indicating that the only thing on our door that should glow is this jewel and everything else shouldn't. Back on the material, we could see that the color swatch has been set to the blue that we're seeing in our scene, but also we have this note here that says HDR. Now we're already familiar with HDR, high dynamic range, and what this is saying is that our light is actually just showing in those extra ranges, which is contributing to the lit color here in the scene. And last but not least is the intensity, which is actually kind of tied to this HDR note here. Notice that the intensity is set above 1. If I bring this down to something like 0.8, the HDR note goes away from our color swatch, and our light really isn't contributing to anything but itself. So it's self-illuminated, but it isn't really illuminating the scene. So let's set this back. I think it was 2.4. There we go. And now we have that extra range of lighting, and we can see that we're back to HDR. The fact that we have the ability to let our materials glow and contribute light to our scene is really exciting. This means that we could actually start utilizing meshes themselves to light a scene appropriately. So imagine a scenario where perhaps you're making an office environment and you have a lot of fluorescent lighting that appears overhead. Rather than adding a series of lights over a fluorescent lighting mesh, you could simply make the model have an emissive channel on its texture, and it will contribute the necessary lighting. You don't actually need to create any external models or specialized textures in order to get emissive lighting to work. To kind of show this off, let's go ahead and create our own glow material and apply it to a Unity primitive. So I'm first going to go down into the materials folder, and I'm going to right click, go to create, choose material, and I'm going to call this my glow. And now let's create a primitive to apply this to. I'm actually going to rotate our sun so we have a little bit of light to work with. That way we can see where to place this. I'm going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and let's put it on a cylinder just to be different. I'm going to bring this down into the scene, and I'm going to place it kind of over here behind this plank of wood and in front of the door. There we go. Now let's apply the MyGlow material. I'm just going to drag it over to the inspector. There we go. And now let's tick emission. It doesn't start glowing yet, but that's because we don't have a color map. We're not going to have one. But our emission color is set to black and its intensity is set to 0. So let's change this color from black to something really dramatic like yellow. And let's set this intensity up above 1 so we get that HDR. Let's just set it right to 2. And now that's all set up, but you may be thinking, wait, where's the lighting? Remember, indirect lighting will only be applied to objects that are not dynamic, and our object is not set to static, so let's go ahead and tick that. And here Unity is making the new calculations. And wow, that's really dramatic. Look at that. So our entire scene is now being really brightly lit with this yellow cylinder. Let's go ahead and rotate our directional light back down so it's fully night. And now we could see how much that light is contributing, and it's just a simple Unity primitive with the emissive channel turned on. So I'm going to reselect the cylinder. Let's come down here and let's play with the intensity a little bit. So I'm going to bring it down to something like 1.2. So we're still getting that HDR value, but we have a nice, more slightly naturalistic look. Now it's probably not going to be too often that you're going to have an object in the scene without any texture on it, but we could still have emissive lighting set up and have a normal texture on top. We don't even need a mask like we have on the door here. Just to kind of show this, I'm going to go to the color channel and I'm just going to pick a random texture to apply to this. And now we could see that our lighting has become significantly darker. Zoom out here so we could see. But we're still getting a glow effect, and it's overlaid with this really interesting texture. Now this can be used to create something like maybe a stone lamp or something where light is just escaping through the cracks. And there you have it. Emissive materials are really easy to set up, but they contribute really interesting lighting scenarios to your scene. Definitely consider using them if you want to go for an interesting lighting effect. In our next clip, we're going to tackle the issue of using dynamic objects in our globally illuminated scene.